There are some things you see as a child and spend the rest of your life trying to convince yourself you imagined them. For me, it was a light. 3 lights, actually. They appeared above Ashbourne Wood when I was 11 years old. They didn't move like aircraft. They didn't move like anything I'd ever seen. And then, one of them came down. I never told anyone what happened next. Not my parents, not my teachers, and certainly not the police. Which is ironic, because 23 years later, I became one. My name is Henry Colebrook. I'm 34 years old, a police constable, a husband, and a father of 2. And I still live in the same little town where I grew up. Ashbourne. It's the sort of place people forget exists. A few thousand residents. 1 high street. A pub that's been there longer than most of the houses. A small primary school. A petrol station. And, on the western edge of town, Ashbourne Wood. It's not really a proper forest. At least, that's what the council calls it. It's mostly old woodland, scrub, streams, and steep patches of ground that become almost impossible to cross after heavy rain. But when I was 11, it felt enormous, like there was another world hiding between the trees. I suppose that's why what happened to me there stayed in my head for so long. Even after I became an adult, even after I became a police officer, even after I told myself there are perfectly reasonable explanations for strange things, because there usually are. Usually. The first strange thing happened in October. Last year. It was just after 11:30 at night when I was driving home from the station. It had been a miserable shift, a domestic dispute, 2 drunk men fighting outside a takeaway, a missing teenager who eventually turned up at a friend's house, and nearly 40 minutes spent explaining to a gentleman that, no, we could not arrest his neighbor because his neighbor had looked at him in a suspicious manner. That last one took some patience. I was turning onto the road that runs along the edge of Ashbourne Wood when I saw it. A light. At first, I thought it was a torch. It was low between the trees. A cold, white light, almost blue. It disappeared, then came back. I slowed the car. The light moved. Not quickly, just enough to make me notice that it wasn't attached to a person. It traveled horizontally through the trees, then stopped. I watched it for perhaps 10 seconds, and suddenly there were three lights floating between the trees. My hands tightened around the steering wheel because I'd seen 3 lights before when I was 11. I pulled the car over. The lights vanished, just like that. No fading, no movement away. They were simply gone. I sat there for several seconds. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, because sometimes your brain does that when something scares you. I actually said out loud, "Brilliant, Henry." Then I drove home. My house backs directly onto the forest. I bought it 6 years ago. My wife, Sarah, thought it was charming. I thought it was cheap. Both statements were true. The garden ends at an old stone wall. Beyond that, trees, lots of them. At night, you can't see much beyond the wall, just blackness. Normally, I like that. That night, I didn't. Sarah was still awake when I came in. She was sitting on the sofa with a cup of tea. She looked at me, then looked towards the window. "You've seen it too." I stopped. "What?" She frowned. "The light." I didn't answer. She put her mug down. "It was in the garden." I felt the muscles in my back tighten. "How long ago?" "About 10 minutes." "What did it look like?" She thought for a moment. "White." "Anything else?" "It was moving." "Where?" "Near the trees." I stared at her. Sarah noticed. "What?" I shook my head. "Nothing." She gave me a suspicious look. You're doing that police thing. What police thing? Where you pretend you're not worried so that everyone else doesn't get worried. I smiled. Occupational hazard. She didn't smile back because she knew me, and she knew when I was lying. The next morning, I went into the forest, not as a police officer, just as a man who wanted an explanation. There were no footprints, no broken branches, nothing obvious, but about 50 meters from the back of my garden, I found something strange. A patch of vegetation had been flattened, not crushed randomly, flattened in a roughly circular area. The grass was wet, but the center was completely dry. I crouched down. There was a smell, something like salt water. That made no sense. We're nearly 30 miles from the coast. I touched the ground. It was warm, not hot, just warm. I pulled my hand back. Then I heard something behind me. A clicking sound. 3 short clicks. I turned. Nothing. Only trees. Very funny, I said. Nobody answered. I stood up. Then I heard it again. Click, click, click. This time, from deeper inside the forest. That afternoon, I mentioned it to my colleague, Mark. Mark had the useful quality of being completely unimpressed by everything. I told him about the lights. He stared at me, then said, "Have you been sleeping?" "Yes. Properly. Mostly. Because my wife says seeing things is usually caused by stress." "Your wife isn't a police officer." "Exactly. She has common sense." I threw a pen at him. He caught it. Then he became serious. "Anyone else see it?" I told him Sarah had. He stopped smiling. "Anyone else?" "Not that I know of." He leaned back. "Could be drones." "I thought that." "Aircraft?" "No." "Someone messing about?" "Possibly." He shrugged. "Then it's probably nothing." That should have made me feel better. It didn't. Because Mark had asked one question he didn't realize was important. "Anyone else?" The answer came that evening. Our neighbor, Mrs. Collins, knocked on our door at around 8. She was 72. She had lived in Ashbourne for 45 years, and she had the sort of face that suggested she had never once been impressed by anything. She stood there, holding a torch. I saw them again. Sarah looked at me. I looked at Mrs. Collins. "How many?" She hesitated. 3. My stomach dropped. "Where?" She pointed toward the forest. "Above the trees." "How long?" "About 5 minutes." "Did they make a sound?" "No." Then she added, "Although there was something else." "What?" She looked at me. "I heard singing." Sarah's expression changed. I felt strangely relieved, because singing was ridiculous. "Like music?" Mrs. Collins shook her head. "No." She thought about it. "Like a wail." That night, I didn't sleep. At 2:17 in the morning, I heard something outside. Not a voice, not an animal, a wet, dragging sound. I got out of bed. Sarah woke up. "What is it?" "Stay here." I went downstairs. I took my torch from the kitchen and stepped into the garden. The air was cold. Mist hung low over the grass. I walked toward the wall. Then I saw it. Something standing between the trees. At first, I thought it was a man. It was roughly human in shape. Tall, perhaps 6'7". Its body was covered in something that looked like black armor. Its shoulders were broad. Its arms long. Its hands were wrong. 3 thick fingers, webbed between the joints. The head was almost completely hairless. Large, dark eyes reflected the beam of my torch, and around its neck were several layers of hard, overlapping structures, almost like armor, except they weren't armor. They moved. I took 1 step backwards. The creature tilted its head. Then it opened its mouth. There were no sharp teeth. Instead, rows of small grinding plates, like something designed to crush shellfish. I couldn't breathe. And then I noticed the most frightening thing. It wasn't looking at me. It was looking past me, at my house, at my children. I raised my radio. My hand was shaking. Control? The creature suddenly moved. Not toward me. Sideways, far too quickly. It disappeared behind a tree. I ran back to the house. I locked every door, every window, and for the first time since I was 11, I remembered what happened in the forest because I'd forgotten something, or rather, I'd spent 23 years refusing to remember it. When I was 11, I hadn't simply seen lights. I'd followed them. My parents were arguing that night. I left the house. I walked into Ashbourne Woods, and I saw the 3 lights hovering above a clearing. One descended. Something came out. It wasn't the creature I saw last year. Not exactly. It was smaller, younger, and it was injured. I remembered hiding behind a tree. I remembered hearing that same clicking sound. I remembered the creature crawling toward a stream. And I remembered something else. Water. A lot of water. The stream had risen violently, as though something had released it upstream. The creature entered the water and vanished. I had spent years telling myself it was a dream, until now. The following morning, I called Mark. We went into the forest together. This time, we brought equipment, thermal cameras, body cameras, and a wildlife specialist named Dr. Helen Shaw. She was the only person we knew who studied unusual animal behavior in the area. When I showed her the flattened ground, she became very quiet. "What is it?" I asked. She crouched. "It's not a landing site." I didn't say it was. "No," she looked at me. "You were thinking it." She brushed away some soil. "There are traces of protein." "Human?" "No." She paused. "Marine?" Mark looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us spoke. Helen continued. "There are also unusual salt concentrations," I said. "There's a river. Fresh water." She stood. "Exactly." That evening, the lights returned. This time, everyone saw them. People came outside. Cars stopped on the road. Phones appeared. 3 lights moved silently above Ashbourne Woods. Then one dropped lower. And suddenly, the entire forest went dark. Every bird stopped. Every insect, every dog in the neighborhood began barking at once. Then came the sound. That deep, low, whale-like call. It wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from beneath us. The ground trembled. And from somewhere inside the forest, something screamed. We found the entrance to an underground drainage tunnel the following day. It had been sealed for decades. Behind it was a network of old channels, some natural, some man-made, and all of them eventually connected to the river. Helen examined the walls. "This place stays wet year-round." Then she found something, a fragment of dark biological material, flexible, but incredibly strong. She held it beneath the light. "It's keratin." "Like skin?" "More like a combination of keratin and mineralized tissue." She looked at me. "Think of a turtle shell." Then she added, "Except grown in overlapping plates." The creature wasn't wearing armor. It had evolved armor. And suddenly, the shape of it made sense. The large eyes, the webbed fingers, the flattened body, the strange clicking, the ability to remain underwater. It wasn't extraterrestrial, at least not necessarily. Helen believed it could be an undiscovered branch of aquatic mammal or reptile, something that had adapted to underground waterways, something isolated, something that had remained hidden for generations. Then she found something that changed everything. A photograph. Old. very old. It showed Ashbourne Wood in 1948. In the background, three strange lights hovered above the trees. That night, I went back alone. I know, police officers aren't supposed to do that. My defense is that I wasn't thinking clearly. I reached the stream. The lights appeared again, 3 of them. But this time, they weren't in the sky. They were beneath the water, moving upstream. I followed them. And then I saw the creature. It stood in the middle of the stream, motionless, watching me. I raised my torch. Its eyes reflected the beam. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then it did something unexpected. It reached into the water and pulled out a small object. It placed the object on a rock. Then it backed away. I stepped closer. It was a child's toy, a small red plastic car. I recognized it. I had owned one exactly like it when I was 11. I'd lost it in the forest. I looked at the creature. It looked back at me. And suddenly, I understood. It hadn't come back because of me. It had been here the whole time. We had simply started noticing it. The lights weren't spacecraft. They were biological, bioluminescent organs, possibly bacterial colonies living within specialized tissue. The clicking wasn't speech. It was echolocation. And the strange blue glow wasn't technology. It was life, a living creature, using light and sound to navigate the darkness beneath the forest. But there was one question I couldn't answer. Why had they become visible now? Then I heard something behind me, another clicking sound, this time closer. I turned. There were 2 more creatures standing among the trees, smaller, younger, and behind them, something enormous moved beneath the surface of the stream. I looked back at the first creature. It wasn't threatening me. It was warning me. The lights suddenly went out. All of them. Complete darkness. And somewhere beneath the water, something breathed. Slowly. Deeply. Like a creature the size of a van, drawing its first breath after a very long sleep. I ran. 3 weeks later, Ashbourne Wood was officially closed. The council blamed unstable ground. That explanation was technically true. It just wasn't the whole truth. The drainage tunnels were sealed. The stream was monitored. And several people from government departments came to town. They didn't tell us much, which honestly was probably the least surprising part. Dr. Shaw disappeared from public view for several months. Mark stopped making jokes about UFOs. And Mrs. Collins installed 3 cameras in her garden. She told me they were for security. I didn't have the heart to tell her they wouldn't help. Because last Tuesday, I saw the lights again. 3 of them, behind my house. They hovered silently above the trees. I watched from my upstairs window. Then one moved closer. Very slowly. It stopped directly above the old stone wall. And for a moment, I saw something beneath it. A silhouette. Tall. Armored. Watching the house. Then another light appeared. And another. Not 3 anymore. 5. I stood there in the dark, watching them. And I realized something that still keeps me awake. When I was 11, I thought the creatures had come down from the sky. I was wrong. They had come up from beneath the forest. And whatever has been living down there all these years isn't alone. Because this morning, when I walked into my garden, I found something waiting on the wall. A small red plastic car. The same one I lost when I was 11, except this time it was wet and covered in salt. I picked it up, turned it over, and underneath, someone had scratched 3 simple marks into the plastic. 3 circles, 3 lights, 3 creatures. I stood there for a long time. Then I heard the clicking from the forest. 3 times, click, click, click. I looked toward the trees, and somewhere deep among them, something answered. 4 clicks, then 5, then 6. More voices joining in, more creatures calling to one another. And that's when I finally understood the truth. The lights weren't calling them. The lights were them. And whatever was happening beneath Ashbourne Woods had only just begun.